Hi guys.
Hey.
Hello.
What's up?
Not much.
Or too much.
Or too
And
much. One
it's
or the
really
other.
I talked to Michelle this morning. She's very helpful. So
Great.
I have some questions about this whole variable names and that kind of thing. So she clarified some of that, but I probably need to be a good idea to check with some of that with you, Quentin, about
Sure.
what
variable names.
Yeah, when I reorganized the questions for the relationship between plaintiff and defendant, because when we asked questions the way the form asks them with the defendant, with our DV survivors a few years ago, they got really frustrated because they were trying to answer questions that hadn't come yet. Like they wanted marriage on the same thing as engaged in dating, and the whole thing about related by marriage or related by blood is really confusing. So we separated those out into different questions. So in fact, you don't get asked those questions unless you need to be, unless like if you don't qualify in any other ways. And then if you actually are unmarried and related by marriage, if you're unmarried and related by marriage, you can just say the defendant was my former spouse, something like that.
Yeah.
So I've set it up, but the way the questions are written, I'm not familiar with that at all. And what I call values, Michelle was telling me, are called variable names, and they're so long, I just got really lost. I did it with my own little thing, so I just wanted to see whether those variable names are used somewhere else, or and Michelle gave me better names for my variable names as well, because I think of them as values. So I got a little lesson on computer talk.
That's good.
Yeah, it was good.
But that form, because I think I also did a bit of the labeling of that form. It's so confusing because it doesn't make sense the way that it's set out. They're not radio buttons, so to speak. You can check multiple of those options, and it's just like, why are these all in one thing?
Well, maybe I can show you what I did. Just that it's just that relationship thing. And that would be good if you just have a look at it and see what you think. But then I'm not quite sure the best way to stick it into the whole sort of structure of the page one, with how to do that. So anyway, that was one thing.
I don't know if I'll be able to help you with that, but I'll definitely be able to have a look at it and see if it makes more sense to me than the form.
Yeah, I think Quentin, I hate to use any of your time at all, Quentin, but I think that would be, if you explain that to me once, I'll get it, and so I don't think I'll have to do it anywhere else, but
I might be able to do it.
Yeah,
I can try, or if Quentin wants.
Well, we did say this morning he might know if it's in other places. I don't think they are in other places, but yeah.
We could just do a search, so that's a pretty good way to check.
Yeah, and
I
also
can't remember if we built any
lists.
Variables off of the definition of those. That would be the reason.
Yeah.
If we.
Yeah. No,
if there was some constructed checkbox that depended on those values.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I've got it, but you might, if you can, you could probably look at it in just a few minutes and figure out make a recommendation as to what we could do. And then Michelle and I could work on the whole variable name thing. If she's got time. I think I can figure it out. I just want to know what direction to go.
Right. That's so Michelle, maybe Quentin can work with Caroline on that, and then Michelle can pick up, once the explanation's been done.
Sure.
Yeah. If you have time, Quentin, I'm not sure what your day.
As long as it's in between this stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll need to merge all these changes, so it makes sense to me to take some time to do that. And we might be able to progress in some of the other stuff too, and make sure that it's all staying in sync.
Okay. I think that maybe we can just see if anyone's having. Yeah. Do you have anything?
Well, I was going to say also I can just work on the if statement. I can just do the if statement, if that's necessary. If we don't want to refactor, then we can just, I can just write the if statement if that would help.
There's about 18 if statements.
Okay, I can probably write those too. But yeah.
Michelle, I'm sure you could figure out if those variables are used too. So if that makes sense and you have time for that, that'd be fine.
Okay.
I can also do that.
Okay, so maybe we just do a formal start of this meeting. We didn't really started. Just to see how everyone's doing and where the progress is made. I think we can talk a little bit about the 209A and then the testing, where we're going to be with that. And I think I figured out how to write the tests for the split up 209A in a way that it's not going to be it's not going to be a problem if the order shifts around. So we can talk about that a little bit. And anything else that anyone has to talk about? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. David, do you have any updates from the court?
Yeah, so we've passed more papers back and forth with red lines on them, and I'm hopeful that this is much closer to the end. There are now the only documents I have not seen yet are some of the exhibits which are in the MOU language, just supposed to be the standing orders. So I don't expect any surprises in those. That should just be reformatting of published stuff. Okay. So I've now actually seen all of the stuff that we're talking about and have given back our edits. And now we're just waiting for them to either accept or change our edits. And then, yeah, but we do have the TRO okay. The other big update is that we've decided to pivot with the 209A instead of going directly to a release with the court to do a private beta testing with DV advocates. So we're going to be looking at, I think they're called the high risk teams. Kate, you used to be on one of those teams, right?
I'm on one now. I'm on the Malden high risk team.
Yeah, so we were gonna try to get a couple of high risk teams. Laura will probably talk to you about maybe getting the Malden high risk team involved.
Yeah, and Laura might be thinking. I was on the Lynn high risk team at my old job.
I think that's what she was thinking. Yes, Michelle.
So if this might be a good time to see if Chris can join in on those, because this might be a good place for user testing, at least for advocate use, and maybe even for like end user use. So like he might have a lot of insights about how things are working and not working. He's had, I think, over 40 years experience in the field. So he has done mostly medical software and that kind of thing, or that's like his largest area of experience. And there are things that he says that I'm like, that seems like a small thing to me, but 40 years of experience, I go, okay, maybe I should listen to this person, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think
so
that's
him getting involved. Look.
Yeah, I mean, basically the way I look at this is we're going to try to get the team of folks together next week. And then basically when we think we have a minimum viable product that is, and here it's a little bit easier than saying it has to be a minimum viable product for the public, say a minimum viable product for experienced DV advocates.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference in what we'll deliver from a functional standpoint, however, will be that we will remove the email to court option, and it would just be a download or email to yourself and then work with the court. And then we'll just have the different teams work with this and give us feedback. And so it'll be a private beta. And as Quentin suggested, we might tweak the PDF so that they can be edited afterwards so that they don't get hindered by anything that's not filled out right, so they can do the check. And I think we'll get a lot of valuable user feedback. And also, we'll be able to put it out so that it's actually helping people because the advocate's going to be using it. And then just to give you some context, as I've alluded to, there's been some turbulence. And the idea here is we get all these different parties on board, vet it, and then once they become advocates for it, then we can use that to help us move into the larger release, into a public release.
Okay.
And not the turbulence that you've alluded to. did I just miss? Was that?
The turbulence I've alluded to has been in regards to the different court departments and their approach to 209As. So the point is that with the 209A can be filed in multiple court departments, and different court departments have different ideas about how best to do that during this emergency. And that means that the court does not speak with a single voice.
Yeah.
And right now, I think it's very hard for them to respond to something in abstract, but having something concrete, especially something concrete that we can say people have been using this and find it valuable, is going to be useful. The other thing is, the scuttlebutt I'm now hearing is that courts are going to be remained closed for a long time. So what's going to happen is the court buildings will be closed, but the courts will start to open up for more and more operation. And they're going to need tools like this to help make it even possible for them to field the volume. So I don't feel the same urgency for us to have this in a public release, but I think we move it to the private beta, and then we can call ourselves in phase 2. And then we can recalibrate so that we're not on burning both ends of things. And then we just methodically go through, and while they're doing the private beta testing, we'll recalibrate some folks to be working on new easy forms. We'll put those out, and then when we have what we need there, and we'll pull the trigger. But I think so the point is, the release of this private beta, I think, will be the trigger for our phase 2.
Okay. Okay. Maybe that can link into what I was just about to say, is that I updated the volunteer guide with Michelle a little bit last night. We actually included David's Slack messages about the different phases in the initial introduction, so that people can kind of get an idea about where we are without having to look at the pinned items on Slack, especially if they're not familiar with Slack. So that's, and then we also removed the workflow from that document and made a link to I know, Quentin, I'm sorry. We made a link to another document.
It's
We
okay.
thought, well, what's one more, so it's not to inundate people. And what Michelle has done, we've got a volunteer Trello, which is, I'm just making sure that all the volunteers are on there. And Michelle has messaged the new people who've come on and just said, this is where we're at. In the interim, can you just complete the survey, and can you just have a look at this document? And then hopefully maybe next week we can start already onboarding volunteers, or the week after, to get started on the workflow again, starting with the PDFs and the labeling and everything like that. Because people are emerging from finals now and they're looking for things to do. So we don't want to lose volunteers. So that's where we are on the volunteer front. We're also trying to get new volunteers in on testing, but we need tests written. That's the first thing, right? So with the 209A tests,
and we're getting
that testing,
and we're teaching the volunteers who are in the testing channel how to write tests, so that we're not the only ones writing tests, which will be helpful.
So I think that we limit the people who are writing the test scenarios, so that's a little bit easier for now. But people who are actually writing the tests, because that's what the time-consuming thing is, we can get more people like that on. And then we're also just making sure that no volunteers are falling through the cracks. But I think with just the 209A testing, what I was thinking of is each screen is basically a section of a couple of rows. So what we can do is we can take the test that the interview as it is now, split up, and put a block around each row, each group of rows. And this might be better if I can actually show you, but put a block around each group of rows, and then if the flow changes, it's easy to just slide those things up and down if it was the correct thing that was supposed to change. So
I actually have an additional suggestion for that, but I can talk to you about that later.
Okay.
But I like it. It's pretty simple. It'd be pretty simple to implement.
Because then we can already get started, because, if they can start writing the tests and we can just then shift the sections up and down, if that's the only thing that's going to really be changing, I think that's something we can get started on today, right?
I think so. As long as, Caroline, I guess it depends somewhat what kind of languages changes we're looking at, and whether those will really
I think we're
impact
we're going to be testing more the logic than the language
Yeah.
right now.
for the lot. Okay.
It's
Then-
yeah, it's
then
not.
yeah,
We don't test the language as much as we're testing if you click on this thing, and I don't think things are going to change in that much of what they say. Well, at least I don't think so. But we can always vet them. The other thing
And
that
we
Michelle
can
brought
change
up,
the tests. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go
the other
ahead.
thing Michelle brought up was who's going to go through how are we going to use these completed tests? What is going to happen with those? Because I feel satisfied with the TRO tests that have been done. I feel satisfied that it's ready to go, and that's from my cursory look at those tests that I'm seeing things that are phase 2 bugs that I would like to get fixed, but they're not going to really drastically implement what would otherwise be the minimum viable product. So what process should we put in place for checking those tests that have been done? And I said, David, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have thoughts?
I did unmute myself because I suspected this was related to Michelle's comment about doing milestones.
Yeah.
So I can jump in and do some of that. So basically what we want to do is we want to establish what is the feature set necessary for the MVP. Is that a correct?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, or at least labeling reports saying this is for the MVP, this is for, stage 2, this is
phase 2 fixes.
Okay.
Right.
And then we'll have to decide how to prioritize new forms being created versus fixing the phase 2 fixes, like which is coming first.
Yeah, and we can. I think that as we go into phase 2, I think and these are famous last words, right? I think we can be to some extent more. I think what we want to do is we want to prioritize those things we can do quickly, and that utilize all of our capacity. So we want to basically make it so that there aren't people sitting in the wings with nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I guess that's actually the thing we probably maximize for, is making sure everyone has something to do. And hopefully a benefit of that will mean that we get stuff out. That being said, I also want us to, I guess it's
That will
balancing.
mean slowing some people down so that they still have stuff to do while other people are doing other things.
Exactly, and that's fine. The point is, once we enter phase 2,
I'm just saying that's a thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once we enter phase 2, nothing is as sort of urgent as it was in phase 1, because we will have crossed the area into no longer having existential threats to the project. So right now, everything that we're dealing with before we launch, I feel is like a potential existential threat to the project. If we don't have this, we don't have buy-in from this group or that group, it's like it could stop things. Once we've actually launched and we have a form, then those sort of recede, and politically we're in a better position than to just deal with what we have. And since we have an all-volunteer workforce, I don't think it's reasonable for us to do anything but sort of go where that volunteer workforce can take us. And so I don't know if I now feel like I'm rambling.
It's all right.
Yeah.
I think we're getting the idea.
I got the idea. I did. I just wanted to, okay, so we've talked about the testing, we've talked about the volunteers. If we start,
Sorry, go ahead. I thought we were moving on to.
And I guess before we leave,
that's fine.
for milestones, do we want to set up milestones that are form specific, correct?
Form specific or package of form specific?
Package of form specific.
Package of,
Yep.
And I guess then there's also there's this superseding, catch-all like intro stuff. But okay.
I think that I just wanted to talk about that. What happens with the actual tests again? I just feel like maybe because we've got all these tests done, we've got the PDFs. Do we run through and check them? What happens with these tests?
I think we need to go through and check the remarks, because a lot of times people won't report some of the things. They're hesitant to report anything that's not super major. So we go through and what they judge as super major, which isn't exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's.
So we go through and we see if there's anything that needs to be addressed immediately. We see if there are problems with our test, with the way we are constructing the tests, which I think the PDF thing, there was partially a problem with the way
we need to figure something out there.
I made a little thing I can show you. We need to, and then like we need to figure out a way to categorize each of those remarks. Make sure that all the testing got done, because at least one of the tests only got partially done through miscommunication.
Okay.
And you know, find a way to label what still needs to be addressing in what phase of the project, and whether we want to make a report for those, and what we want to do with the ones that we don't want to make a report for. We might collect them on a spreadsheet, basically.
Was that here? Or was it a bigger? Was it a bigger one? Just like how will we use the bug reports? Is that what you're asking? Not how we'll filter them, but how
will we use the tests?
With the test spreadsheets that we have. Then we can use those test spreadsheets as foundations for future tests when we're repeating the tests. But they go into an archive so that we can look back and see if there is a consistent problem that we need to deal with, or if this is our record. Like I described that other time, this is our record of the tests. And at some point we can probably start throwing them away, but not right now. Right?
But we do need to go through them. And my question is, are you and I going to go through them? Are we going to split those up? And
maybe you and I will go through them, plus someone, kind of as a ride along, so that other people can learn how to go through them.
Okay. I just wanted to check that.
Because there's too many things piling up. We need to be able to hand off some of this stuff. Yeah, I think we need to look out for people who might be able to start coordinating testers that are not us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like my question was answered. The other thing is the cover letter. Chandler used your made one, Quentin, and then edited it, and I saw you had some ideas on what should be added. I don't know if that's what should just be in the form, because I thought that a couple of those points were already in the letter, but I might have been mistaken.
It was just the whole list I thought should be in the form. Yeah, some things are probably in there.
Yeah, so things like mass access. Sorry, yeah?
Oh, and I was just going to say, this actually will require an okay from the court again, because anytime we change the PDF, we've got to get a requirement. So
currently,
PDF?
The cover page will be a new thing.
Well,
I see.
I think because it's part of the PDF. So the way the MOU gives us freedom to change things after they've said it is we can change things in the interview as long as they don't affect the output, which is defined as the PDF. So if we're adding a new sheet to the PDF, that will be something they'll have to assent to as well. It should just be the one time once we figure out what the form is. It's like, and I suspect they'll be very welcoming, because they're not going to want to have to print out the email body and the form. So I'm just providing that, like, we won't be able to, for the TRO, we won't be able to just say, okay, add this and then go. We will have to do another touch base.
Yeah. So the things that Quentin put out that are important, and one of the things that I think that isn't included now that should be included, is that this form, you said information about mass access, but I'm thinking it shouldn't be information about, it should rather be like this form was completed with the assistance of mass access or something like that. And I don't know if this is something that, what kind of language do you think? I mean, I'm not sure if anyone has any thoughts on what kind of language the court would prefer, or
just, the following was submitted via a mass access platform.
Yeah, that's probably all that it needs to be, just like so people can track down where the form came from, essentially, in one more way.
Yeah, it's just, the cover letter is just so that it's primarily there for those forms that might come up that haven't been altered to include things like email and cell phone, so that we can say, here is, the contact information the person provided.
That's something else that we need to put in. Or it gets dragged in, it gets pulled in at the footer. But I don't know if you wanted to change that, Quentin, and put it in the actual body of the letter.
As long as all the information's on there, even the label would be fine to be, I think, right? Like, so I don't have one set way that I think the form should look. I just think it needs to include those details, and if two people think it's the way it should look, that's probably good.
Okay. And the reason that I was confident with Chandler, maybe, and I'll just take those comments back to him, is that he clocked in the court, the housing court, and he said he worked quite extensively there with them. So I just, we can maybe put that to the channel and see if people are, we get a mass approval, or 3 or 4 people saying,
the only thing I might suggest is it might be nice to make this generalizable beyond, so we don't have to write a new cover page for every
that's a good thought
form.
Yeah.
Because right now it's saying, to just simply make it about, really, it's not find this and do something with it. It's just, here is where this came from, and here is the contact information for that person.
And the case caption.
I suppose you.
That can be a variable, so we can make that dynamic. Like, it can change for every form, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a signed thing or either. I don't want the court necessarily having to feel like this has to be something that becomes a part of the
file.
record.
Yeah.
It's just like a receipt. It's saying, hey, imagine it like this. It's someone's filing by email. The thing they're filing is in the attachment, and the email's just saying, here's my attachment. This is what would have been in the body of the email, but we don't actually expect the court to print out the body of the email. So it's basically, it's like, hey, I'm Bob, and this is my cell phone number. Here is my attached filing. And so this is like, this came from Bob. Here is his cell phone number. So it doesn't have to be formatted. In fact, it might be better to not format it looking like a letter. It might be better to make it look more like a receipt. I don't know. What are people's feelings on that?
I think it should look
David,
like its
I kind of
purpose.
agree with you.
I think it should look like its purpose, whatever its purpose ends up being.
Yeah, and I think its purpose is a receipt.
It's like a fax cover page
letter.
on a fax, really, isn't
Exactly.
it? That's what you want.
Oh, that's a really good model.
That's a very good model.
Okay.
I know it's really different from what I dumped onto the channel too, and I didn't really clarify. But that was just the example I had of a cover letter.
But also, you think about, you want that to go to the court, but then you're going to have something different
for the user.
So it's easy to get it mixed up, what the function of each. And I would imagine that you also want the user to see everything that goes to the court. So the user would also see the fact sheet, whatever we call it, the court's cover page. Is there a way to separate out the 2 final products so that the court wouldn't get the cover page that the client gets?
I'm pretty sure we can make one for each of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, programmatically, it seems possible.
If you're sending to the court.
We can't. We didn't hear you, Quentin.
Yes, we could definitely use 2 different cover pages, or as you're saying, Caroline, have an extra cover page, which is, these are instructions for you, don't file these.
Because I think the other thing is, in their last packet, the court's last 209A packet, they include their new abbreviated instructions for the 209A packet. And I think it's important for us to include that page in the packet that users get, but not include it in the packet that the courts get. I don't think we need to give them a copy of their own instructions, because they will print it out, right? And so that's ridiculous to have them printing out thousands of those pages.
Where should I actually extracted those instructions from the 209A? Where should I?
Yeah.
Because when I separated out those new 209A forms. Should I be putting those instructions somewhere?
What if you put them right in upload it as a template, because does that make sense to upload as a template to GitHub? Because you don't have to fill it out. It's just something that gets attached.
Mm-hmm.
Oops.
I'm muted. You could just take off everything that's not the instructions and upload the instructions as its own standalone PDF. And then
that's what I've done.
We'll add it onto.
Right.
Okay. So can I just do that?
Yeah, and we might put it in the static folder rather than templates, if you catch that, but don't worry about it. I can move it over too.
In the what?
In the
There's
static
a folder for
static folder.
for static
I can show you
Resources,
where
that's
it
what
is.
this would be. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's that, and then maybe just on that point, David, we need to update that form with that has all the list of the different forms, the sheet with the different forms, to make the PDFs the labeled
Yep.
ones. Now the labeled PDFs are saved in a number of different places, and then the ones that we rely upon are the ones that are saved in GitHub. What
So
links do you want?
In
it doesn't
certain
matter
branches of GitHub.
the way you just want it to be a link to a publicly available or accessible version of the PDF. Because what I end up doing is I will take whatever URL you pointed to and I suck down the actual file, and then I repackage it when we put it out to the server. So even if it's like the, so the Trello ones were fine because I could access those as long as it's the final version. The GitHub one is fine as long as it's the raw version of the actual file. So it's the actual PDF. But yeah, anywhere so my answer is just anywhere that's a URL that anyone could go to and just take the PDF, because what I end up doing is just pulling it in.
Okay, I'll make sure that gets done this weekend. And then that's all that I wanted to talk about. Does anybody, it's 1 o'clock, does anybody have anything else that they want to mention?
So the escape button is implemented weirdly, but it's implemented. I've made a PR. Sorry, I didn't alert about the PR. I meant to, and I think I didn't in the end. Also, do people who will have the bandwidth to let me know when to loop Chris in, or who will have the bandwidth to loop or to themselves loop Chris in to the process that's going to happen with the advocates?
So do we think that he or she, I actually don't know, Chris,
Yeah.
Do we want to wait till we have the MVP and then loop them in then?
I think I'll ask him, but I'll ask him. We kind of missed the phase of discovery work, so I'm wondering if he can do some of that work here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure that that's possible.
Because it seems like we want to bring him in once there's something to actually like kick the tires. Is that
right? But I thought so when it goes to the advocates, that's when it's ready to kick the tires, right? So at least
or you could, we can kick the tires before we send it to the advocates too.
I can talk to him, at least not till phase 2, but once we're in phase 2, then at least when the advocates are going to kick the tires, I think it's and before that, so he can make a plan for how to integrate into the kicking of the tires, right? So there needs to be some lead time, so that
so some lead time
draw that up.
To inform him that we'll be entering a private beta.
So who will be able to either tell me or tell him? That I just want to know, who's got hold of that.
So what are we waiting for as opposed to just tell him that? I guess I'm just trying to figure out the sequence.
Oh, I don't know if now is the time. I don't know the timing of the thing. I didn't understand what the timing was. So if now is the time, then I'll loop him in. But it's not phase 2 yet. That's the
right. It'll be phase 2 once we. The problem is that we're calling phase 2 once we hand them the MVP, and we want to give them a little lead time before that. So you could flag it for him now, saying we're going to do this, and we're just giving you the heads up.
So maybe I can connect you two, because he will have questions about what is going to happen, right?
That sounds good.
There's a UX channel. So if you're already in the UX channel, I can hook you.
I believe I'm already in the UX channel. You just at me and I'll.
Okay.
A lot of channels.
So I'll give him. He has
a lot of channels.
So recently he has been known some people and been connected with 3 people in all that have died from COVID. So he's, we're he still wants to be involved. I think he does. I know he still wants to be involved. Just be aware that is going on as well.
Okay.
It's getting more and more real with people that dying, and it's just
and it's not, I think that's not stopping anytime soon. So
and then also the related risks of, I'm seeing just horrific numbers of domestic violence cases, especially locally, because of people being locked down together. And that's also so I'm really glad that we're doing this.
This is why we're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just open this up a little bit more because it seems useful. How are people feeling?
I feel like it all has to happen now. I feel like it has
If you
to
want me,
happen now because it's so urgent.
does anyone want me to turn off the recording so we can talk about
Yeah.
recording? I'm going to turn off the
Maybe-
recording.
Maybe that'll be a good idea.